Hi, I'm Nicholas T. Davis. Welcome to the Central New York Writers Marketplace Showcase. And I'm here with Adam Cornell. He's a science fiction author like myself. And he's from Watertown, New York. And okay. Tell me a little bit about yourself, where you're from, what your hobbies other than writing.
Sure, Nick. Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me and including me in the Central New York Writers interviews. I grew up in Binghamton, New York, which is right there near the Pennsylvania border. And my entire life, always wanted to be a writer. And as far back, I remember being in first grade, wanting to write. So that's always been a desire. But I got into art, wanted to draw comic books, and tried that for a little bit, and then became a professional graphic artist. I still am a graphic artist, still draw, still do illustration work, and still get an opportunity to write. I both write, like you mentioned, sci-fi. I've done some middle grade books that are sci-fi, and I've done some more mystery thriller books, but I've also had an opportunity to draw comic books for a company that is it's actually a movie film producing company, and I was able to do comic books for that. So as far as my hobbies that I like to do, I love to read, love to read. Got a stack of books next to my bed that I'm happy to catch up on these days. I like comic books. I also have a morning show here in Watertown on the radio, Tunes 92.5. So I dabbled in just about every form of media you could possibly imagine, for both for fun and for work.
Can you tell us a little bit about your latest book?
Sure. The last book that I published was called Hollow Point. It was a sequel to The Catskills, and it was more of a mystery thriller. I would say probably more thriller than mystery, actually. And it just kind of followed the small town police officer who's dealing with bad guys coming into town. But also, too, I wanted to tell a story about a guy who's just in way over his head. The things that are being thrown at him, whether it be thrown from everyday work in the small town to the level of violence from the bad guys that are coming after him, even dealing with his relationships. He's just way in out of his league and has to push really, really hard in order to succeed. And then even whether or not there's a point you get to where you've lost everything and it's just time to give up. So that's my last book, Hollow Point. And again, it was a sequel to The Catskills, which dealt more with the small town and the very isolated nature of a police captain in a very rural mountainous area in the Catskill Mountains.
What's your next project going to be?
Well, the project that I'm working on right now is the third book in the Tesla series. I had written two middle grade books, the Tesla Connection and the Tesla Resistance, and both of those dealt with two children, brother and sister, Tip and Alina, who inadvertently find one of Nikola Tesla's creations that zips them back into the 1800s. Then all of the things that go wrong with time travel and science fiction novels do go wrong. Now I'm working on the final chapter in that series, which is called the Tesla Dynamic, which looks to both fix all the problems from the first two novels, but also may leave a few things unfixed. So that's what I'm working on now.
So, what writers influenced you to start writing?
Well, I think the authors that got me interested in reading first were science fiction authors. So Isaac Asimov, Frank Herbert with the Dune series, certainly J.R.R. Tolkien. Those were the authors that suddenly there's a whole new world that I could dive into that was completely different than the world I had grown up in. Then later on, I got hooked on adventure stories by Tom Clancy, Clive Cussler, and most recently Lee Child. All of them along the lines influenced me in wanting to tell those stories. And
Yeah,
interestingly enough, some of the authors that inspired me to want to write were the ones that frustrated me the most, where the story didn't end the way I wanted it to. And I thought, well, you know what? I'm going to go write something that I want it to end the way I want it to end. And so I found that to be one of the things that pushed me to write, is if I wasn't happy with someone else's universe, well, I can go build my own.
Yeah, some of the authors you mentioned are a lot of my influences too. Frank Herbert, Isaac Asimov, and a lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
Who is your favorite out of out of all the authors?
It's almost like asking who's your favorite child, right?
Yeah.
There's so
Yeah.
many good ones. I mean, I can even go back to some of the authors when I was a young kid, like Roald Dahl and the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, that just captivated me. I think the one that I've read the most recently would probably be Lee Child. And actually, when I heard that he was retiring and turning things over to his brother, it was kind of a little disappointing. But I just found those to be, I'm so busy these days that I could just pick up one of those books, escape for a couple of chapters, and it was just a good way to kind of deviate. I am rereading some of the Dune books as well, but Agatha Christie is another author who I just finished rereading Murder on the Orient Express again, because I just love the way that she handled her characters. And she could turn a phrase so well, say so much in so few words, which I've found I'd really love to learn and improve my writing to be able to craft it in such a manner. So as of right now, probably the author that I've read the most recently would be Lee Child, just because it's an easy, very accessible book that you can pick up, read a couple chapters, and not miss anything if you don't read it for another week or so.
What's your biggest challenge as a writer?
Time. Just getting the time to sit down and write. I have a family. I've got 3 kids, a wife, very busy lifestyle, and getting the time to sit down and get into writing mode. That's that point. It's a strange thing to explain to people who aren't writers, but it's almost like a living daydream where you transport your brain into this fictional world that you're creating, and there everything seems so real and just makes sense, and you're just telling that story that you're tapping into, if you will. And anytime real life comes in and interrupts that, you're shaken from it, you're ripped out of it, and then it takes a little time to get back into it. So if you're sitting there and you're writing, and all of a sudden dad comes into the room, you're basically the shattered, and then getting back into writing mode is tough. So right now, that has been the largest challenge. The second challenge is, because I'm an artist as well, and I have other art projects, there's just a level of creativity that it takes to be able to work on those art projects as well. And sometimes I find myself just creatively exhausted, where I've worked on an art piece, or I've designed something, or I've drawn something, and now it's time to sit down and write. There's nothing left in the tank to be creative. So those are the 2 challenges that I find as an author these days.
How do you respond to negative reviews?
Well, I'll tell you, one negative review that I have online really crushed me, because it seemed to say everything that I was afraid someone would say about my work. And then fortunately, I found out that it was actually an individual who had a personal grudge against me and kind of knew the words to say to try to hurt and sting me. And she did, man, she did. But I have had other people come and say, I liked this character, but I didn't like the way the story turned out, like at book signings and so forth. Oh, I loved that book, but I didn't like the way you did this or did that. And there have been times when there's been actual legitimate critique on the way I formatted a story, perhaps putting one chapter in one location and so on. I always try to take it as it's an opportunity to learn and get better. I look at the critiques and say, are these legitimate, or is it just somebody that says, oh, I didn't like it? And there's going to be, for every person that likes your book, there's probably going to be 10 that don't, just because that's the nature of what we're producing. We're producing something that is, in all sense of the word, it's open to interpretation and open to likes and dislikes. So I always try to see, is there something tangible that I can take away from it that will make me a better writer? And then it doesn't usually get me down. People are usually pretty nice about the way they give you in person, the way they give you critiques, things that they liked or didn't like. And then sometimes there's just somebody that comes by that's a knucklehead. And you just like, all right, I'm sorry you didn't like it. Maybe this other author down the block will be an author that you'll enjoy. That's fine. And I try to let it just not affect me. I find that if I'm writing for myself, mostly for my own enjoyment, then that's the craft of writing, the action of writing is what I enjoy. And if other people get an opportunity to enjoy it too, that's great. And if they don't, I didn't really write it for them anyway. I wrote it for myself. So
Yeah. Yeah. What advice would you give to a new author?
to write and to read. So many authors are saying, I'm thinking of writing a book. Well, write it. Sit down and write it. Fall in love with the craft of writing, what you're actually doing. And no two writers write the same. Some have to sit down and do a very detailed outline of their story, and then they fill in, they build the skeleton, and then they put the flesh on it. Others have to sit down and have nothing on their mind, and they're just kind of stream of consciousness writers. Everybody's different, but everybody has to put in the work and write. And I think it was Ernest Hemingway that used to say, write drunk, edit sober. And that's kind of it. Let yourself go when you're doing the first draft, and then really look critically at the edit. The edit, and oftentimes 2, 3, 4 different levels of editing sometimes occur. That's when you can really hone it. And sometimes don't be afraid to discard ideas. If you get a certain way into your story, like, boy, I don't like where this is going. Okay, rewind the tape, find out where it was that mistake started happening, jettison the bad stuff, and then start again from that point forward. But write. That's the big thing. The more you read as well, the better writer you become. If you read things that you like, read things you don't like, outside your comfort zone, maybe you're all into sci-fi, well, go and read a mystery. Because I'll tell you, if you have a good sci-fi novel and it's got tinges of mystery to it, that's a great story. If you read a romance story and you're into mystery, well, that romance may play into making you a better mystery writer. So all of those things, read the things outside of your core genre that you enjoy, and that will make you a better, more well-rounded author.
Okay. You do your own book covers, or do you have somebody do them for you?
Fortunately, because I'm a graphic artist and an illustrator, it's easier for me to do my own book covers, and it's one of the aspects that I enjoy doing. I will say that if you're an independent author and you're looking, you say, oh, I'm gonna write the book, I need to get it published, but I'm looking, where do I spend the money? Probably one of the best places to spend your money is on an editor and on a book cover designer. Those are probably the two things that I would spend money on if I didn't have those talents myself. So I'm able to design my book covers myself, but I know many others aren't. It's worth it to have a good designer. And one of the resources, find out any of the local colleges or universities near you who have a graphic design program. Go and talk to the professors or the teachers of that graphic design program and offer your book to the class as an opportunity for design. The students would love to actually be working on a real project, and you might get one of the best covers you've ever had for a small amount of money and interact with some of the teachers and professors. So I found that to be one of the ways to inexpensively get a nice book cover designed.
Okay. How do you market your books?
Well, obviously online is a number one way to do it. Amazon's the big place to go, but Barnes and Noble as well, Books A Million, getting your books both digitally and in print to be sold, those channels. Marketing, I've found the in-person book signings tend to be one of the best ways to get more fans. Gives you an opportunity to talk about your books, gives you an opportunity to put an emotional personality with the book. I've found when it comes to marketing, people feel and they don't covet what they don't know exists. So if they have no clue, no concept that your book exists, then they're not going to want to buy it. And also too, if they have a good conversation with you, they're going to remember that and they're going to remember how they feel about that. And that will correspond to maybe when your next book comes out. Oh yeah, I remember talking to that guy or that gal. I think I'm going to pick that book up. So you're playing the long game when it comes to marketing books. You're not looking for the quick sale. You're looking for developing fans, especially if you want to do this as a career, developing fans over a long period of time. So marketing through anytime you have an opportunity to go and do a book signing, especially in a group, if there's other authors that are there, those aren't your enemies. Those are your friends, because they will draw more people in with you, and hopefully you'll all get a bigger audience, and there's plenty of readers to go around. So getting an opportunity to do those things, libraries can be a good place to set up book signings, and then of course doing online. One of the places that I'm looking into right now is BookBub.com. You end up giving away digital copies of your book on there, but you can build a nice fan base so that when your next one comes out, that sometimes gives you an opportunity to get those paying fans to pick up your books.
What's my next question? Oh, how long does it usually take you to write a book when you're not being disrupted by the kids or the wife?
Each one is different. It's so, my first novel, The Catskills, I wrote that was just like, I couldn't sleep. I was going through a time of, I guess, insomnia. So the time that I should have been going to bed at 9 or 10 o'clock each night, I was wide awake until 4 in the morning. So I just wrote and wrote, and I wrote The Catskills in about a month and a half. I wrote the next book that I wrote went into the children's series, which was the Tesla Connection. The book is half as many pages, and it took me twice as long to write. Then again with the Tesla Resistance, it was about the same time. It took about 3.5 to 4 months to write, and then almost equal amount of time to edit. And then my most recent book, Hollow Point, that one took me over a year to write. It was just a tough thing. I was going through dealing with the loss of my grandmother, and just emotionally I was struggling trying to write it. But when it was done, surprisingly enough, the editing took less time, because it seems like the longer I took as I was writing, I was doing editing on the fly. And so it was closer to what the finished product was. It wasn't just a shotgun blast initially and then kind of picking up the pieces. It was a more refined writing experience. The one I'm working on right now, the Tesla Dynamic, I've actually been working on for several years now. And I'm coming to the conclusion of having it ready to go back through some additional editing. So each one has seemed to be different. And I wish my goal always, though, is when I sit down to write, I always want to write 1,000 to 2,000 words in any writing session. And I find that gives me enough momentum to want to be able to pick up and keep going and keep going. The most I've ever written, I did 12,000 words in a day once. And I was just, the story was there, as was the bottle of bourbon, and I was just flying. And it was just, I ended up breaking that keyboard by the time I was done with that book. I have these monster gorilla hands, so I was just pounding away on this keyboard, and all of a sudden the end stopped working, and it was like, oh, what's going on? But yeah, that was a 12,000 word day, and a lot of it had to be edited, but it was just a deluge of creativity that was allowed out that day.
What's the most famous person you would like to meet?
Famous person I'd like to meet? The people that I think I'd like to meet the most are authors. I don't really have, it's kind of strange. I'll tell you this. I've been able to kind of rub elbows with famous people over my lifetime. I lived in New Orleans for a little while, and I was a radio DJ down there. So I met a lot of musicians, and they're just people. That was one of the interesting things. They're people. They're just like you and me. We're trying to do this thing that we enjoy doing, whether it be writing or acting or on the radio, and so I found them to be pretty normal individuals. Authors, though, some of those people have some deep, scary minds, and I've enjoyed meeting the ones that I've had an opportunity to meet so far. I'd never got an opportunity to meet Clive Cussler, but I did interact with him through some correspondence with letters, and so that was nice. And again, Lee Child, I think I've met once. As far as someone I'd love to meet, that's a tough one. I don't know. I just enjoy meeting people in general. So I find that whether it be the janitor or the waiter, they have interesting stories. Whether it be the author or the actor, they have interesting stories as well. And I love stories. So I just as soon meet somebody, whether they're famous or not, with a good story to tell. And I'm great. I'm fine with that.
Okay. Where can we find your books?
My books are available pretty much online wherever books are sold. So Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Books a Million. For a while they were on Walmart.com, but it looks like that's been discontinued. You can, if you're interested, you can go to adamcornell.com. Adamcornell.com has a little bio of me, and then you can go to where the books are, and you can click right there, and that takes you right to the link. The books are available for download via Kindle or in paperback format.
All right. Thanks for joining us, Adam. And we're going to move on to our next writer at 3. That will be Tommy Clark. So from the Central New York Writers Show Marketplace Virtual Showcase, it's a lot to say in one word. We'll see you later. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.